Welcome to Black History Boot Camp, y'all. You are welcome here. My name is Morgan. Vanessa, are you there?
Hey, y'all. Hey, Morgan.
Hey, y'all. For all the live listeners, we just listened to a song by Big Mama Thornton. The name of the song is Hound Dog. It might be familiar to you because somebody done stole it named Elvis Presley from Big Mama Thornton, and that ain't even the Black History fact of the day. Yes, that's a bonus. How you doing today, V?
I'm doing good. I'm walking. I'm just in New York just for the day, and it was freezing. And then I was like, I can't be walking out here in this cold. But then I stopped in the Old Navy. I bought me some $10 tights. Let me tell you, y'all, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothes. So we can walk in the winter, we can walk in the fall. All you just need is some warm clothes. So now I'm feeling good, Morgan. I feel like I can walk 2 miles.
Oh, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you, but it might be my earphones.
Oh, it might be mine too.
You have like a different setup.
I have the same one, but I'll make
sure. All right. Tyrene, just shoot us a message if you can't hear us. Otherwise, we can go on. Welcome to Black History Boot Camp, y'all. If today's your day one, it's the most important day for you. For many of us in this 21-day walking journey, a 21-day meditation, we are on day 14 of Black History Boot Camp, where we are looking at philosophies for freedom fighting. We are looking at contrasts and moral dilemmas. And we are really getting the kinds of intellectual and physical grit we need for the revolution, y'all. Today's moral dilemma is tech or turn off. Vanessa, technology or turn it off. It is something we are all grappling with now in a world in a world of complete and utter overwhelm and information overload. We are in a place where we are thinking about the advent of, let me say hi to my neighbors. How y'all doing? they sing it walking down the street. They sing it so loud. And they're construction workers here in the community. What was I saying? We are in a moment of complete and utter overwhelm, Vanessa. And you know, we have social media, which has these very precise algorithms, which are, essentially harvesting our data and feeding information back to us in ways that are mimicking organic communication. And it's hard for us to discern what is true and what is not true on social media, and then using kind of the hook of our friends and family and our photo albums and everything to keep us coming back, and the kind of dopamine hit of like this constant scroll, right? And then we are in the context of artificial intelligence known as AI, which promises to be faster, sharper, brighter than the human brain even now. And that Elon Musk says that in just a few years, that 95% of, or something in the 90% of sentient thought will come from artificial intelligence, and then organic thought will make up a fraction of the ideas in the world. And Vanessa and I have had the great privilege of representing this movement on some of the largest stages in the world, including TED. And the last 2 or 3 main TED stage talks that we went to, our convenings that we went to up in Vancouver, were dominated by talks of technology and AI and what it can do. And I remember being floored by this particular conversation that said it would take one PhD student all 4 years of her career to decode one little string of protein. And that's important because that's how we are decoding, all things that solve for disease and health and all sorts of things, the different proteins in our world. And in one weekend, an AI system decoded hundreds of thousands of proteins. And the implication of that and what it means for medicine, what it means for our very reality is just compelling, to say the least. Compelling. Like, Could we use AI to solve for the diseases that, have taken our loved ones too soon? Absolutely. Will AI make us feel less alone and like we belong more? Probably not. Probably not. We saw different examples of AI mimicking grandmothers who had passed on in order to comfort grandchildren, and all sorts of things. AI on stage with live humans mimicking their voice and their eyes. And I mean, just so many seemingly miraculous things that technology is advancing. And then the checks on that are hard to put our arms around, like who's checking, who's monitoring, and is AI developing and self-monitoring itself? And so some of us, play around with this, with social media every day, with putting our information online, and with ChatGPT asking questions, feeding kind of the algorithms with our own data, information, and creativity. Are you with me, Dee?
I am, Morgan.
Yeah, the flip side of social media is just as compelling. The flip side of technology is just as compelling. In many ways, having the kind of dopamine hit of a like or a love or a heart or a kind word may be the kind of communication that you get in a given day that really allows you to set forward in your day with love and purpose. And so it solves for a really big need to connect us. I know that I talk to my friends and family way more because of technology. Everything from social media to, I was telling Vanessa, I use Marco Polo with my sister and my niece and my nephew to have these kind of asynchronous conversations. And so just thinking about like how we commune, how we connect, how we communicate. Technology has been very helpful, everything from the cell phone even, right? And so the big question is, do we continue to use technology or do we turn it off? I mean, there's so much research around both the benefits and the detriments of using technology. Vanessa, I want to start with a personal question for you. Why did you opt to get off social media personally a couple of weeks ago?
It's a good question because a group that I'm involved in yesterday, they reached out to me and they want me to post this stuff on my social media page. And I was like, I don't even post my own stuff on my social media page. And I got off because I felt hard for me to be present in real life situations without, in my mind, editing the real situation to see how I was going to tell the story on social media. So that's one thing. Almost every scenario, every day I look cute. I was like, I'm going to post this picture. Every meeting or conference, and I was like, I'm going to tell this story. And it feels like it was a competing situation between showing up and being present or packaging whatever the thing I was doing. And then it felt like the quality of my experience dictated whether other people who weren't even in the experience responded to it or not. So then I started feeling like, am I even successful in the things I'm doing unless other people saw it, unless other people were liking it, unless other people were moved by it. And that felt dangerous to me. And then on top of that, it just felt like my feed and the information and news I was getting was so artificially curated that it was affecting like my thought patterns, my inspiration, all sorts of things. So the space didn't feel like a space that is inviting to me. It didn't feel like a space I wanted to go to.
It looks like your life.
And it felt like, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that the people who I genuinely want to build community with, I am genuinely building community with those people in other ways. I'm on this call with the Girl Trip women. I am on, Zoom and meetings with the people at work. My family, I'm actually picking up the phone and calling them more. And then that raised the question, then who am I communicating for on these platforms if the people who are closest to me I'm already communicating with? So it just felt like it just felt like one more thing I had to do in consideration of all those things versus a space that felt like supportive.
Thank you for sharing that. What was some of the artificial stuff that you felt like was controlling your thinking?
OMG. I mean, from the election cycle, there was a bunch of news that I felt like I questioned around what was coming from the election cycle, to from everything from astrology to mental health, everything from the type of style that was coming across my platform to the type of sponsored ads that I was getting. It just felt like it was telling me where to spend my time, where to spend my money, and how to think.
Yeah. No, seriously, like if I type something in WhatsApp or on text message, I will go into Instagram and it will immediately be a fake ass meme. It's just like
Exactly.
what you just did was this, and I'd be like, there's no way that this psychobabble could come from anywhere else except for my macro data. You know what I mean? And like the other day, it was crazy. Instagram told me to plug in my phone because my battery was low, and I had just texted that I'm going to leave in 20 minutes to my friend. I went to go see Gladiator. It was really good. But I was like,
Wait, you saw Gladiator?
I did. Since I watched it, it was so cute. It was classic. It was so good.
How long is Gladiator? Okay. I don't even think Gladiator's out here. I'm just letting you know you got a first look.
Oh, yeah, no, it was out in theaters here. And I saw this interview of Denzel Washington with this gay guy. He's hilarious. He was just like, yo, I'm not going to give away no spoilers on this interview. He goes, but when you was getting in that water, he goes, you had on that beautiful Versace robe. He was like, not the Versace. So the whole movie, I kept going, not the Versace, not the Versace. So it's so funny. We had such a good time at the movies. But yeah, but Instagram told me that I need to plug in my phone. It was just like, it was like a fake cartoon that was like, when I'm about to leave, 20-minute battery. And then it was like, now 21 minutes. And I was just like, what? And what algorithm would I get this cartoon? It's so weird. So I know for a fact there's this kind of macro data that's curating our lives in really profound ways. And sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes you are having abandonment issues and they want to tell you how to deal with childhood trauma or adverse childhood experiences. And they tell you in this kind of psychoanalytical way that looks authoritative. But then sometimes you are getting information that is like echo chamber kind of information. So anyway, I was thinking about this, Vanessa, and the reason I started with Hound Dog is because a couple of months ago, this is for everybody on the phone, I called Vanessa and I was like, V, I think we have to get off social media as an organization. And Vanessa was running our social media at the time. Her whole team was running it and spending a significant amount of time, capacity, and energy to write good stories. And we didn't act on it at first. This was like at the beginning of the year. We didn't act on it. And we were just like, yeah, but that's the number one way that we're communicating with our members, and it's easy, and we control it, and we've invested so much money in building up this following. And I don't know if you remember what I told you why. Do you remember the conversation? Because later on you went to a conference and I remember you had some information. Yeah, I was just saying that I really feel like if we have to point to like the number one culprit of why women are kind of locked onto their couches and immobile and inactive, it's because we're scrolling on social media so much. And I think that social media is designed to capture and arrest our attention. It's designed to kind of create this sort of addiction cycle of scrolling and observing and being on the sidelines. And I was like, it's the exact opposite of the kind of lifestyle activism that I think we stand on. And you agreed, by the way. And still, it is this catch-22 where it's like, and it is a highly effective, not only communications tool, but organizing tool. I mean, you look at like all of the movements that have started on Twitter and even Facebook, right? And even TikTok, everything from Say Her Name to hashtag Me Too to hashtag Black Lives Matter. It's an effective way to organize. So it was a hard decision. And then, Vanessa, do you remember you went to a conference and somebody talked about it and you came back with fresh perspective on it? Do you remember what that guy said?
I do remember it was a guy from Patagonia, but I can't remember what he said, but the same thing. I think.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about this as a trend, Vanessa, because part of why Black women are exhausted is because we do so much labor. And I was like, maybe we have the right to sit and observe and consume sometimes and relax. And maybe Like for me, I love Instagram. It's relaxing. I've curated it for myself. It feels like I just only post art that inspires me, or photography that inspires me, or quotes that inspire me. And I'm intentional about that. And so I like my feed, and it feels relaxing. I was like, certainly there's no harm there. And then I thought about Black history. And I thought about people like Big Mama Thornton, who were the content creators of her day, and how her content, like the song Hound Dog, was then absorbed into the zeitgeist of all of cultural humanity and packaged, sold, and sold back to her as something that was relevant and necessary. So if you don't know the story of Big Mama Thornton, she sang this song, "You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog," walking around my door, sniffing around my door. It's talking about a man who won't leave her alone, which makes perfect sense. And young, white Elvis Presley took her song, just lifted her entire song, sang it as it is, and became and moved his hips in ways that he saw people on Beale Street moving their hips, kind of like snake hips, by the way, and became a sensation, a global sensation whose name we all know. We all know Elvis Presley's name. Few of us know Big Mama Thornton's name. And I was thinking, like, what is the relevance of that or technology right now, V? Here's the relevance. First of all, Black women are 14% of the total population in America, but we constitute over 50% of followers of the highest influencers on social media. We also we spend disproportionate amounts of time on social media. The average amount of time that a Black woman spends on social media is 3 hours a day on social media. That is the average. That is far and above any other demographic. Black women are also disproportionately represented in memes and in emoji, like the live kind of emojis, or whatever you call them, GIFs, in GIFs. Is it GIFs or GIFs? Don't have me on here sounding like that. I think it's GIFs. Gonna lose your job. It's gifts, yeah. And I was just like, I just immediately thought about the woman who was singing, "You gonna lose your job." And I was just like, I don't know how to say gifts. You gonna lose your job. But there have been these beautiful and profound arguments that Black women are doing the emotional labor of the entire world through those gifts, right? Yeah. Through our responses, our eye rolls, our gasps, our laughter, our slap on the knees, like all of the things, the emotional, real kind of platform for how we even express emotions is Black woman emotion. And so this heavy, heavy, heavy content lift is fascinating to me. Yeah, V, so those were startling statistics. And if you're new to Girl Trek, understand this. We used to share this video called 23 and a half hours. And the video said, if you could reduce your sitting to 23 and a half hours a day, you could save your own lives. And the opposite of that is if you could go for a 30-minute walk every day, you could save your own life. So the idea that these companies have been competing for our attention and so efficiently that they've gotten us as a disproportionate population to be arrested and addicted to this scrolling for 3 hours a day was fascinating to me. It feels like the opposite of our mission, to get out and go walking even for just 30 minutes. So my brain was just lit on fire with this. I was like, this is a continuation of us being kind of a brain in a vat where we are feeding and sourcing the content for the world while we are arrested and immobilized in this kind of system, this kind of matrix, where, you know, we're being harvested through our brain, our soul, our spirit, and our emotion, and doing all of the labor. So that's maybe a wild theory. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's exact. Maybe it's precise. Or maybe it's wild. It's up to you. And I encourage you all to think about it. And still, I'm not shaming nobody. I was just looking at Instagram before I got on here. I'm not shaming nobody. My mom texts me all the time using Facebook Messenger. I'm not shaming anybody. I'm just asking us to think about it. And then I started to imagine, Vanessa, what it might look like boycotted. And oh my God, I learned something so fascinating. Do you know where the word boycott came from?
No.
Me either. Nobody even ever asked me. I never even thought of it.
But you know
So
now.
I was looking up, yes, I was looking up the most effective boycotts because I started thinking about like what was the original technology? What was the original? Good afternoon, good evening. I was saying, what is the original technology that we've used and did we ever boycott it? I was like, the original technology we use is our feminine wile in order to be a society. We was just like, let me get this done in this way by batting my eyes. And I was like, and we have used actually boycotting in order to change that technology even, because have you ever heard of, this has happened all over the world. There have been groups of women who divested from actual sex and having sex.
Yes, I have heard of it.
Having sex in order to change society, right? And I was like, it's kind of not the same because being on social media is definitely not sex, but it definitely is a power that we have. And so boycott, first of all, the word boycott came from somebody's name, Vanessa. His name was Charles Boycott. I know that sounds fake. His name is Charles. His name is Charles Boycott. I promise you. There was this man named Charles Boycott, and he was in Scotland back in the day, the 19th century, late 1800s, and he was like he was a overseer essentially of this land for this aristocrat, and he had all of these parcels of land, and there was an economic downturn in the 1880s in Scotland. And nobody could pay their rent. Nobody could pay for seed. Nobody could pay for equipment. Nobody could do anything. And this man was unrelenting. He was like, you got to pay your rent. And you got to, like, no. And you ain't getting no bushels. He was just like ruthless. And so there were a group of people in Scotland who came together and organized that every single person in the town was going to block this man out. They didn't like him. They was going to block him out from all of the different chains of supply, from the seeds, from the tillers of the earth to the people who cooked for him. And they just completely iced him out and boycotted him and let all of the harvest rot on the vine. And so he had to bring in laborers all the way from wherever, England or wherever the aristocrat was living. They had to bus in laborers, and they spent way more money than the harvest was worth. And it was a successful boycott. And so they started calling, we're going to boycott you, just like, because they did that to Charles Boycott. Yeah. I was like, that's amazing. It's amazing. But I was just thinking about what it would look like, if a significant amount of Black women divested from the things that were making us sick, not just social media, but just identifying the things that make us sick and really divesting from it. And I was just like, do we even have the kind of power to do that, the kind of influence, the kind of economic power to do that? Would it make a difference if we did it? Turns out it would be. We have trillions of dollars in buying power. And in fact, we have more buying power than any other distinct demographic because of racism and sexism, actually. It's because we are disproportionately head of our households and head of our economies because Black men have been suffering under the boot of racism for so long, institutional racism for so long. So they are just unable to steward the resources for whatever reason. Prison industrial complex, military industrial complex, whatever is taking Black men from leaving their homes. So Black women have wealth, and we don't have as much wealth as anybody else in the country, but we have more spending power and liquidity and flexibility in it individually because of the distribution of power between Black men and Black women. And so we actually have in particular industries like entertainment and particular industries like beauty, we have a lot of power. That's why you see people like particular brands in beauty really tailoring to Black women because we have a lot of spending power and a lot of influence. So I was like, absolutely, we could have something. So I just started trying to think about and learn about the most famous boycotts in history. So the first one that I learned about was in Liberia. Hold on one second.
Even as you're looking, Morgan, for this information, I over a year ago also stopped shopping at the big online platforms for buying stuff. After one research of how it was dramatically impacting small business, and me and my man now are small business owners. So I was already thinking about it before then, but it really impacts small business, and it really takes away from the local economy in really powerful ways when we are not considerate around even where we are consuming, even if it feels easy. And I started asking myself, I was like, I live in a neighborhood where everything is literally a 5-block walk for me. Why do I need to actually, never mind what it does to the environment, never mind all these other things, why do I need to send away for something, right, and have it sent to me in bulk? Even if I could save $3 or $4, or even if the convenience, I was like, that actually is not contributing to the world I want to do. So I'm super mindful about not just going online to buy something versus trying to source it from somewhere in my actual neighborhood, to support those local businesses who make the neighborhood feel alive and bring so much joy to it and are the actual glue of the community.
I love that. And particularly if you direct your dollars to Black-owned businesses, there is a really positive statistic about Black women that of all of the women-owned entrepreneurial ventures in America, something like upwards of 40%, I think like 42%, are started by Black women, which is like 200 times more than our proportional representation, right? We're only 14%. So I was like, some businesses now. So I agree, if there's ways you can direct to local businesses, both from an environmental impact, but you can also direct to women-owned and Black-owned businesses, I think that we're on to something. Sorry, I was listening to you. I wasn't looking at my notes. So keep talking. What else you got?
A lot of things.
Okay.
A lot of things.
There were so many. So what's the most famous boycott you know of, V? If we're going to learn
Montgomery
how to
boycott.
effectively, what's the most effective one? Okay, tell the people
Montgomery
about
boycott. Well, first of all, segregation. Yes, segregation. And folks there was just like, look, don't be making fun of my 4th grade education on this. But no, I'm just kidding. Let me just break it down for you. Segregation, y'all. And we wanted to integrate the transportation system. And the people there were like, you know what? We don't need to take these buses. We don't organize our own rides until they actually recognize our power. We don't have to spend our money there. So for over 369 days, I think it was, they boycotted the buses, and they actually created an alternative transportation system. And then they effectively were able to secure immigration rights. Was that right, Morgan?
That was PhD level. It was so good. And the key there is they created an alternative to meet their needs, which we would have to do.
That's right.
That's right. From social media, we would really have to think about how we share our stories, how we communicate, etc. The protests that I was really interested in when we first started talking about this topic a long time ago, the like technology in office, I was thinking about the women in Liberia. So there's several wars, 2 major wars in Liberia. And when I was doing the research, Vanessa, first of all, the women met at Tubman Park for their protest. And I was like, whoa, that's so powerful. Because, Liberia was started by expats who came from, actually here in hometown in Maryland, and went back to Liberia. So apparently there's a Tubman Park there. I didn't know. And this is where these women started. So it was organized by a woman named Lima Gobwe, and the Liberian women were both Christian and Muslim, which was already a big deal that Christian and Muslim women were working together for this. And they were trying to create, she actually won the Nobel Peace Prize as well, Vanessa, in I think 2011. And they were trying to end the war in Liberia, the second war in Liberia. And there was so much fighting, right? And so they organized sit-ins, and while they were wearing like all white, walking through the streets to symbolize peace. And then they initiated what they called a sex strike, refusing to have sexual relationships with their partners until the peace negotiations advanced. They staged nonviolent protests outside of the presidential office, peace talks, forcing negotiations, and helping to end Liberia's civil war, which is why she got the Nobel Peace Prize. Another of the organizers was Sirleaf, who became the first female president of Liberia. And I was like, they were so wildly successful with that. There's another, you might have heard of this, because you've been to Argentina, right?
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the Mothers of the Plaza protest?
No.
You have, yeah. So these mothers.
I haven't heard of that protest.
Yeah. So, in Argentina, there was also war, and a lot of the people who were on the wrong side of the war were disappearing, right? And mothers of disappeared children during Argentina's dirty war from 1977 to present day started doing silent marches across the plaza, again, wearing all white, but they had headscarves embroidered with their children's names on them. And I thought that was such a beautiful, visual of what it would look like to protest. There was, I think we got the kind of term tree hugging from this other kind of protest or boycott called the Chipko movement, which was in India. And these were village women who were trying to protest, or who were protesting deforestation because these corporations were knocking down their trees for carbon fuel. And they were hugging trees to prevent them from being cut down and singing traditional songs and prayers to emphasize their connection to the land. And they were forming human chains around the forest to target the logging industry. I'm telling us all of these. I'm about to say some more because I just want us to start to get fired up around what our power is, right? There were the naked protests that you may have heard of in places like Nigeria and Kenya. I remember when Gari Matai had the women who were protesting with her take their shirts off. And the reason they did it is because nudity was symbolic. To shame the authorities, particularly when it was older women, this, we will strip everything down and be our most vulnerable selves in front of you. I beg, please stop this injustice. And in Nigeria, Uganda, and Kenya, it was used nudity as a form of protest against oil companies, big forest companies, etc. So I love that. Gandhi salt marches, Vanessa, you said that in our TED Talk, right? And I already knew about the salt marches, but I had forgotten about the textile work that he did, right? So, British was a colonial ruler in India and had these very oppressive taxes on salt, which was vital to livelihood, right? And so Gandhi led a 200-mile plus march, a walk down to the river or to the sea, where he started making salt illegally from the seawater, harvesting salt illegally to protest the British monopoly of the salt industry. And the boycott, all the news came out, and he was just harassed, beaten, arrested so many times. And he also started boycotting British goods like textiles. And that's why he was wearing that robe, because he started doing that wheel, whatever you call that wheel, and knitting together his own textiles. So he didn't have to wear the textiles from the British colonizers. And he really did unify millions of people around his nonviolent movement and inspired the civil rights movement. So that was Gandhi's salt marches and his boycott. Vanessa, one that I love the most is also American, the Delano Great Boycott. Your boy Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and United Farm Workers. Yes. So we know that particularly Mexican American and Filipino American farmers and laborers were exploited by big farms, particularly around California. And so Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and USW urged people to stop buying grapes, first of all. So they boycotted grapes. They said, we're not buying table grapes anymore. And then they publicized farm workers' poor working conditions. And then it resulted in, there was so much outcry, and Si Se Puede, we know, that it resulted in new labor policies and practices. And one of the things we've been talking a lot about in Girl Trek is how do we change the systems, the policies, and the practices that make us sick in the first place. So this is a good example of that. This one affects you, or is in line with you, because this one came out of UCLA. You know the most famous boycott to come out of UCLA? This is kind of a trick question.
I don't.
Too big of a history.
I know.
Anti-apartheid.
Oh, okay.
Anti-apartheid. Yeah. It really was started with students, and chiefly students out of the UC system in California in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s all the way. And it was about protesting the racial segregation under apartheid in South Africa, as we talked about a few days ago. It was a global boycott of anything made in South Africa, goods, sports teams, any cultural exchange, nothing. We don't do nothing South African as long as the white Afrikaners are ruling and oppressing our people. Was the boycott. So many countries divested from companies that did business in South Africa, and activists like our very
and so many students
who live here.
Yeah, and so many students put pressure on their universities to specifically divest from any even investments that they had in the stock market that was feeding the school, but that was directly tied to apartheid. And it's powerful that you're even bringing this up, because last week when I was in Baltimore at the Well, this Black woman who I went to Morgan State, she stood up, and she was, because the Morgan State band had played, and she was just like, I feel so honored to be here, and I'm thinking about the students across campuses, because when I was on Morgan State, I was protesting for anti-apartheid, and she said, and it doesn't exist anymore. She was like, so when we feel right now discouraged, she's like, we actually have to start uplifting the stories of when the things we did actually worked, to remind people that we have created really powerful change, and we've created it in really sustaining ways that we benefit from now, but maybe just our memories aren't long enough.
Oh, I hope somebody writes down her quote, because that's just the whole thesis for today. I was like, how can I inspire people to not be afraid to take a stand? When we feel like our minds are being controlled, our time is being harvested, like that, this kind of addictive technology, these scroll technologies where billions of dollars are being spent to keep us addicted to our phone. It's like, we can do something about this for ourselves and our children. And I was just thinking, like, we can't.
We could do something, Morgan, but we gotta be uncomfortable. So we could do something, but we have to be willing to be uncomfortable. And I'm saying that because we talked about Colin Kaepernick on Black History Boot Camp, and I feel like we even brought him up again earlier when we were talking about John Carlos and Tommy Smith on the first episode of this season. And I'm saying that a lot of people were pushing for a boycott of the NFL, and yet they couldn't coordinate or organize it because Black folks was like, I ain't giving up my Sunday football. And we just didn't want to be without that level of entertainment. And so we have got to be willing to be uncomfortable more, and we have to be willing to be uncomfortable alone, because sometimes people are waiting for the masses of people to move before you move. But actually, you just got to start making the personal choices, and then you got to move other people your way. And so sometimes a boycott of one feels like it don't even make no sense, and yet it does make sense. And it reminds me of the person who's been sitting outside of the White House. There's somebody who's been protesting outside the White House, I don't know, like 20 years, 30 years, they'd be always out there. But I'm just like, they believe in their thing, and they're out there, and they're not concerned if other people are joining them or not. They are just like, I believe in this thing, and I love that level of conviction.
I do too. Ooh, you reminded me of so much stuff. There was an effective boycott on the other side of actually Nike, because Nike supported Colin Kaepernick, and there was an effective boycott where people who thought that Colin Kaepernick should be fired did an effective one on the other side. So you're right. We have to get organized. We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Vanessa, in 1915, there were rent strikes in Scotland where the landlords during World War I kept raising rents, even though the wages were stagnated. And the tenants collectively refused to pay their rent. And then the women led an effort to physically block evictions. So they was trying, and then they created a mutual aid for affected families. And the strike pressured the government to implement rent control. And this was in Scotland in 1915. There was, you mentioned students requiring their universities to divest. That happened in the fossil fuel divestment movement. The women's strike movement, this was good. Government policies restricting abortion rights in 2020 in Poland, right? So the women in Poland walked out of their jobs and homes to participate in marches, disrupting daily life across the country. Businesses, schools, public services were impacted, integrated symbolic actions like wearing black, and went into protest, and they saved abortion rights in Poland. We know about the Dakota pipeline protest, Vanessa. Our friend Nick Tilson was involved in this and was a leader of it. The energy corporations were trying to do fracking and pipelines all across sacred lands here in this country, across the Dakotas. And the indigenous activists and allies created a physical encampment there and said, we're just at Standing Rock, and said, we're just not going to move, right? And they used social media. This is one of the things that they use social media for. There's so many of these kinds of examples. There was one where all of these women, I can't remember where it was, I think it was somewhere in England, all decided to not play football games anymore because they understood that in order to get their right, I think it was for fair pay, in order to get their rights, they had to impact the economy. And so similar to the Montgomery bus boycotts, where over 50% of the people who had public transportation were Black people, they were like, we have power here. And so these women stopped going to the football games, or the not football, soccer. It's called soccer, but it's called football there. And I was just like, this is so powerful. I was just so inspired by that. So as things start to feel overwhelming for us, you all, we have to pay attention. Right now, maybe the risk reward is fine. Maybe social media is fine. Maybe AI is fine. And I want you to know that we have power. And I want you to know that we come from a legacy of people who know how to organize. And I want you to know that our people power can change systems, can crumble laws and policies that are holding us, right? And can demand the attention of government. And so as we think about our very personal decisions now of, am I going to go for a walk or am I going to scroll on social media today? I want you to remember that you can do a protest of one and say, not for me today. And I want you to remember that we are connected here, that we are organized every single day. And the moment it starts to turn to where it is affecting our life expectancy and it's a clear and present danger, we are learning how to boycott here. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. Shout out to the women in the community, Rhonda, who've led the way. Yeah, I thought we could just do an amalgamated one today. That's all I got today, Vanessa. And I wanted to end with Gil Scott-Heron, which was one of the most important songs of the Black Power movement, and it is a song that we put on our Instagram when we went off, and it is half spoken word, half song from, I think he's from Brooklyn, and it's called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." So be well, you guys. We will see you tomorrow off for day 15. Any final words, Dee?
See y'all tomorrow. Thank you, Morgan.
Bye, y'all.